Okay. Well, I'm glad we did that until it wasn't 10 minutes into the message. So, I guess we got to do check next week. So we're tonight in Exodus 26. Hopefully you're going to get to those first 30 verses. And as you'll notice, things aren't really in a nice chronological order the way we would picture building a house. We would start saying, well, lay the foundation, and then you put the walls up, and then you put the roof on. It doesn't work that way. Here he started with the Ark of the Covenant. That was the first thing. The holiest of holiest, the most inside of the most inside. I think it's good because it is a picture of how God does with us. How do we become the temple of God to the world? It starts on the inside, right? It starts in the Holy of Holies where God changes us and then slowly makes us a worshiper and makes us a person of God, and eventually. But religion says, let's get the outside looking good. Get a haircut, wear a suit, get a briefcase or a 10-speed, or, start going to do all the religious things. And eventually, if you do this religious repetition enough, it'll change the inside of you. Of course, it doesn't work, But here, it starts with the ark, and then we went to the menorah and so forth. But let's step back a minute and ask again, why the tabernacle? Well, in 25 verse 8, he told us very clearly that let them make a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. And of course, it was a very limited way, wasn't it? They had to have a high priest only who could go into the Holy of Holies, and only there once a year. They had to have a mediator between God and man. They couldn't go directly to God, right? And of course, in the New Testament, Jesus, our tabernacle, he is the only mediator, and we come directly into that throne room, don't we? To that place where there is mercy, the mercy seat, and grace for all that we need. But nevertheless, it's a picture, and remember, he says here many, many times, he said in verse 9 of last week in chapter 25, boy, I'm giving you this pattern. I've shown it to you. Moses got to see this heavenly vision and do it exactly like this. Remember? Don't deviate. It's got to be exact. And then later, guys, we're going to skip a bunch of chapters because he literally says, build it this way. And he says, and they got this artisan and he built it. And it just goes through the same exact verses. But what is God saying? They did it exact. Because had they not done it exact, I wouldn't have entered in there. I wouldn't have been a part of it. I wouldn't have been able to worship with them. So it's an exact picture of the tabernacle in heaven, which is important. Because as we look at this tabernacle, and I'll just say right up front, I have a really hard time when people start giving interpretations of names and things and without it clearly saying it in the Bible. Okay? So if the Bible says, I'll make you as white as snow and your sins will be forgiven. Well, what does white as snow, what's that mean? It means exactly that, completely pure. So I'm not reaching. But if I say, well, the number 10 in the Bible represents this, or the number 13 represents that, I can suggest that it might, but I can't say it and build doctrines on it. But I do think that when we get to heaven, and we're going to look at all the specifics of the feet and the inches and the colors and the shapes and all this, I think it all will be a clear picture of Christ. But the New Testament gives us, the Bible gives us little pieces of the understanding of it. It doesn't give us a whole. So we really need to be careful. And I'll explain that a little more tonight. But I will say that this tabernacle does represent Jesus. Why? Because it tells us plainly. Remember in John 1:14, the Word became flesh and what? Dwelt. That's the word tabernacle, guys. To live in a tent, to live in a tabernacle. Dwelt among us. We beheld his glory, glories of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So we saw the fullness of the Father and the Son in the earthly tabernacle of Jesus' body. Remember in Matthew 1:23, and the virgin will give birth to a child, she'll bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is translated what? God with us. So if you would, Jesus is the tabernacle where we can come and be with God, and God can be with them. And this is exactly what we saw in the New Testament, is Jesus being the mediator and being the tabernacle and as the Holy of Holies and as the light of the world and as the bread of life. Every part of the tabernacle, Christ is. And this is what we're doing. Why are we building this tabernacle? Because it's prophesying of Christ and a full, complete covenant in Christ. We see that heavenly picture in Revelation 21:3. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God." So behold the tabernacle. It's here. It's with men. And in the heavens now, this tabernacle, it's Christ, and he's with them. Again, John 14 also tells us that this tabernacle can have the glory. Remember in John 1:14, he became flesh and dwelt among us, and what happened? We beheld the glory of the only begotten of God. Later, we're going to read in Exodus 40, in verse 34 and 35, when they're dedicating this tabernacle, the cloud of the tabernacle came in, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting because the cloud rested upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. This is what it tells us of Jesus' earthly tabernacle. God is dwelling in it. The glory as of the only begotten of the Father, the glory that Moses couldn't even stand in. They could stand in it. And guess what? We who are born again, we just saw it in Revelation 21. We're going to go, and the tabernacle is going to be with men, and men with the tabernacle. So it's a wonderful design. The tabernacle, or later the temple. Our bodies are tabernacles. You know that? And they're pretty wonderfully made. What's that say in Psalms 139? Oh, fearfully and wonderfully you've been made. We've been knitted by our mother's wombs. All our bodies are pretty spectacular, knitted by God very specifically. It still blows my mind when I think of every person who's ever lived on this planet has a unique, different DNA. That's amazing. He did that for all of us who were made in God's image. How much if you would, the DNA of Christ. And then what happens with this tabernacle? It tells us that it's also the church. We are the body of Christ. We are the tabernacle. We're the temple. Our bodies become the temple. Together, collectively, we become this tabernacle, this temple. In Ephesians 2, verse 19 to 22, "Now therefore you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and the members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone." This is the building of the temple rather than the tabernacle. "But in whom the whole building, being fitted together, grows into the holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are, being built together for a" what? "Dwelling place of God in the Spirit." So the tabernacle, it's where God would meet, but more importantly, it's a prophecy of where we would meet with God in human flesh, and even greater when we would be with Christ in heaven forever. Greater yet, he's here in the midst of us now. We are the tabernacle, and we are eating of the bread, and we are the light of the world, and we are in the Holy of Holies, and we can come into the Ark of the Covenant, to the Holy of Holies, boldly into the throne of grace. Boy, next week, guys, I'm saving it. The veil. The veil. Boy, buckle up, get ready, bring your friends. Next week, we're going to look at the veil. It's going to be blown away, the last part of this chapter. But either way, it's an amazing, integral thing, and so many facets of it, so many insights for it. And so he starts with the inside, the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, and he goes on, and God's working in us to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. God's doing it. The greatest work God is doing on earth, it's not through us, is it? It's in us. That's the greatest work. Men would see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. So far, we have seen the ark in chapter 25, and then the lid of the ark, which is the mercy seat. We saw the table of showbread, and then the lampstand. And tonight, we're going to look in the first 14 verses at the 4 outer coverings of the ceiling or the roof of the tabernacle. And you're going to say, well, did we cover the walls? No, we haven't. We're going to cover the walls after we cover the roof. You're going to go, that's sort of strange. Believe me, I almost started to say, let's just skip down and do the walls first, and then let's come back up and do the roof. But, we got to stay with the Bible formula here. And then in verse 15 to 30, we're going to see the actual walls, the structure of the tabernacle. And then next week, in verse 31 to 37, we'll look at the veil. Again, this tabernacle, guys, I don't think you're appreciating how small it is. We see these 8-foot tables that you're at. Well, that's too big, and there we see a space in between it. So lift up your right arm there, Craig, and Roland, lift up your left arm. That's 15 feet. That's how wide it was. I measured from the front of the stage here to that pole. I wouldn't say in the middle of the building, but sort of in the middle of the building back there. That's 45 feet. So lift up your arms again, guys. So starting here at the front of the stage to that pole, this is the size of the tabernacle, guys. Do you see how small it was? The Holy of Holies was 15 feet by 15 feet. Very, very small. 15. It's a square where the Holy of Holies is. The outside is called the Holy Place, and then where the Ark of the Covenant behind the veil is called the Holy of Holies. So it had 2 sections. Well, let's look at these first 6 verses, and I'm reading in the New King James Bible. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine woven linen, blue, purple, scarlet thread, with artistic designs of cherubim. Those are angels, right? Well, you shall weave them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, 42 feet, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits, or 6 feet. Every one of the curtains shall have the same measurements. 5 curtains shall be coupled into one another. The other 5 curtains shall be coupled into one another. And you shall make the loops of the blue yarn on the edge of the curtain and on the selvage, or the end piece, and of one set. Likewise, you shall do on the outer edge of the curtain on the second set. 50 loops you shall make in one curtain, 50 loops you shall make in the edge of the curtain, and the end of the second set, and the loops with the clasp in one another. And you shall make 50 clasps of gold, and the couple of curtains together with the clasp. So it shall be one tabernacle. Now, that's pretty hard to read. The King James, the New King James, the New American Standard are what we call literal translations. So what that says is, we're going to give you the exact word, and it's a very good chance we will put it in a bad English sentence. Grammar and those kind of things they're trying to do, and sometimes they'll add words to try to make it flow a little better. But often when we are reading literal translations, it's hard, it's choppy. But the thing is, I can find that word in English and I'll find it in Greek. But now if you go to a word for word, a thought for thought translation, and then you say, oh, there's that word, I'm looking in the English, let me look it up in the Greek, and you go to look at it, that word's not even in the Greek. That's the problem. But let me tell you, it's a good idea to read a non-literal translation of the Bible devotionally. I know Billy Graham, when he got up in the morning, he always did his devotions with something other than a little translation. He loved the Living Bible or the NIV, some of these, because it was devotional, it was in modern English. So let me read this in a modern English. I have it right there in your notes for you. Look at these first 6 verses in the New Living Translation. Some people who hate these modern translations called this not a little true translation, because sometimes they really do get it wrong. But this is the guy's commentary in the midst of it. So it's sort of a guy reading it and then putting it in his own words. But look at how easy this is to understand. Make the tabernacle, New Living Translation, verse 1 through 6. Make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine woven linen. Decorate the curtains with blue, purple, and scarlet thread with skillfully embroidered cherubim. These 10 curtains must all be exactly the same size, 42 feet long and 6 feet wide. Join 5 of these curtains together to make one long curtain. Then join the other 5 into a second long curtain. Put loops of purple yarn around the edge of the last curtain in each set. The 50 loops along the edge of the one curtain are to match the 50 loops along the edge of the other curtain. Then make 50 golden clasps and fasten the curtains together with the clasps. In this way, the tabernacle will be made of one continuous piece. Whew, isn't that a whole lot easier to understand? So, very simply, we have inside the first layer, there's going to be 4 curtains on top of each other that make the roof. The last one is waterproof. But the first one is the decorative one. And you go in and there's cherubim on each of the 6 by 42 sections. So picture a long, skinny piece, 6 feet, which is less, I can stretch 8 feet, so about 6 feet. And you got 10 of them. 5 of them are to be sewn together, and the other 5 are to be sewn together. On the edges are a purple thread so it doesn't fray. And then on the inside where they're going to connect, you make it in such a way so the clasp of gold can hook the 2, 5 and 5 together into one continuous one. Now, most believe that the curtain would be set so those golden clasps would be right at where the veil would be, which is the curtain that separates from the holy place to the Holy of Holies. So it would be right above it or right at the edge of it or something. And so the priest, you walk in and it's beautiful. What are you looking at? Purple and scarlet and blue. And you've got these cherubim like they're flying around right above you in this beautiful, beautiful ceiling tapestry piece. Okay? We got that now? Now, some try to say, okay, 10 is like the number of man's responsibility. So man has a responsibility to be holy because there's like the 10 Commandments, which, you know. And again, I say, well, it could be, maybe not. But then it's linen. This first topic is linen. You say, well, is linen clear in the Bible? Yeah, linen. Now, that's clear in the Bible. Linen is a symbol of righteousness or purity. Remember in Revelation 19, verse 7 and 8? Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come. This is a heavenly picture. His wife, the church, us, the bride of Christ, has made herself ready. And to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright. Fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. And then in verse 14 of Revelation 19, and the armies in heaven following Christ on our horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. And, you know, when you read some of the songs about angels and stuff, maybe this gives you a new perspective. In Psalm 17:8, It says, keep me as an apple of your eye, hide me under the shadow of your wings. So this is in David's picture, desiring to go into the temple. He can't. He's a king. He's not of the Levites. But many of the Psalms, he says, oh, I wish I was a bird where I could just make a nest in the temple and live there, or in the tabernacle. That's all David ever saw. And then the clasp of gold, here, make note, because the next curtain is going to have the same design, but a clasp of bronze. And so we see the first of 4 curtains here mentioned. Now we're going to go on to verse 7 through 13. This time, I'm just going to read it only out of the New Living Translation. Okay? Verse 7 to 13. Make 11 curtains of goat's hair, clothed and served as a tent covering for the tabernacle. These 11 curtains must be exactly the same size, bigger, 45 feet by 6 feet wide. Join 5 of these curtains together to make one long curtain, and join the other 6 into a second long curtain. Allow 3 feet of the material from the second set of curtains to hang over the front. So we got a little porch, don't we? Of the sacred tent, make 50 loops for one edge of each large curtain, and make 50 bronze clasps, not gold, but bronze clasps, and fasten the loops of the long curtains with the clasps. And this way the tent covering will be made of one continuous piece. The remaining 3 feet of this tent covering will be left to hang over the back of the curtain. Allow 18 inches of the remaining material to hang over the other side, so the tabernacle is completely covered. So the second one is of goat's hair, and it's a little bit bigger, right? So we have some for the front of it, some for the back of it, some for hanging over the sides of it. And goats, the goat hair, typically it's a coarse fabric, dark, thick. Some say it was the color of black. Others say no, it was the color white. So it sort of depicts on which translation you're going with, on what you're picturing. Are we going to say this one represents righteousness, it's white, or are we going to say this one's black and represents sin? Because the next one's going to be red, you see. So it depends on how you want to do that. But remember what a goat can, not always, matter of fact, it often isn't, but sometimes the goat is representative of a sinner, right? There in Matthew 25, Jesus, it says on the great throne, he's going to separate the sheep from the goats, and he puts the goats on the left side, and he judges them for being sinners. And the sheep are righteous. So sometimes that can be the case. So that's why some say it's black and it's goat, and it's representing the sin of man. And so the next one that we get to, it's red, and it's a ram, it's a sheep. Look at verse 14 now. Now, I want to read verse 14 out of the New King James. You shall also make the covering of ram skin, which is a bull, a horn, a sheep with horns, right? And I want it dyed red for the tent, and covering of the badger skin above that. So 2 more curtains, one of ram and the other of the badger. But look at the New Living Translation this time. Verse 14. Complete the tent covering with protective layer of tan ram skins and a layer of fine goat skin leather. Do you see what I'm pointing out, verse 14 in the New Living Translation? You can't always trust it. That's my point. It's a horrible translation. That verse 14, it doesn't say ram and dye it red, which is clearly there in the Hebrew text. So this is why I'm saying with the modern translations, use them, but with your eyes full open, because sometimes they'll give you a wonderful translation that just is not true. So forget using the Living Translation of verse 14. But it's first a ram and then a badger. And remember the badger? We've been through that. Some say it could be a porpoise or a sea cow. Could be a badger. We don't know. It's an ancient word. It's lost its meaning. But the ram, we do know what that is, and it's red. So some people see this is a picture. The third level is Christ being sacrificed for us and his blood covering up the sin. You see, this is what they're seeing there. And then when you got the porpoise skin or the badger skin, what's that mean? They have no idea. It means that it's waterproof. That's what it means. But for sure, the ram, and it definitely being red, seems to signify sacrifice, right? A blood sacrifice. Remember Abraham there in Genesis 22, he says, Isaac's like, well, Father, here's the fire, here's the wood, where's the sacrifice? And I love that verse where he says, God will provide himself a sacrifice. And of course, then the ram was caught in the thicket, and they named the place Jehovah Jireh, the Lord there provided in this way. But I would like to make a note that final outer skin was not a very quality looking thing. It would have been brash and ugly. So what most people would have saw was this sort of ugly, tiny tent. And the priests are going in there to worship. Now understand, all the pagans, they probably did everything they could to make their places of worship pretty spectacular. But outwardly, now if you could go inside, which you couldn't, you would have saw gold. You would have saw beauty. You would have sensed the presence of God. But from the outside, it's interesting of Jesus. In Isaiah 53:2, a prophecy about him. It says, for he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, as the root out of dry ground. Listen to this. He has no form or comeliness. In other words, he's ugly. And when they see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. Jesus outwardly was not intimidating to anyone. He was from a poverty-stricken household in a very worst location in all of Israel, Nazareth. And outwardly, he didn't intimidate. You didn't look at him going, oh, he's so smart, I'm so stupid. Oh, he's so beautiful, I'm so ugly. He's so, no, Jesus was a person that intimidated no one. And this is, again, part of the nature of God. It is when we get to heaven, I think the thing we will be blown away with is when we see God, is that he's just a regular guy. I picture him sort of in overalls and, looking like the janitor or something. Going, oh, that's God. Of course, then when he sits on the throne, he's majestic. But he's, for lack of a better word, he's sort of down to earth. That's the picture we get of God. Is he intimidates no one. He is gentle and lowly of heart, and everyone can come unto him and find rest for their souls in his presence. And this is the picture we get of the average person looking on, without able to go inside and see the glory and the majesty. This is all you see. So I know that's a lot to try to take in, and I did it as quick as I could. But I have 3 videos back to back. That's the thing I realized. When I've taught Exodus in the past, we didn't have YouTube. And YouTube, a lot of weird stuff on there. Okay, don't just think I can type in Tabernacle and watch whatever comes up. Some really weird stuff on there. I mean, every cult has their 2-minute version. But anyway, if you go through it, there's some good ones in there, and I picked some out. Hopefully this will help you. Okay, so we're going to watch three of them back to back.
Moreover, thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue, and purple, and scarlet, With cherubims of cunning work shalt thou make them. The length of one curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits, and every one of the curtains shall have one measure. The 5 curtains shall be coupled together one to another, and other 5 curtains shall be coupled one to another. And thou shalt make loops of blue upon the edge of the one curtain, from the selvage in the coupling. And likewise shalt thou make in the uttermost edge of another curtain, in the coupling of the second. 50 loops shalt thou make in the one curtain, and 50 loops shalt thou make in the edge of the curtain that is in the coupling of the second, that the loops may take hold one of another. And thou shalt make 50 taches of gold, and couple the curtains together with the taches, and it shall be one tabernacle. And thou shalt make curtains of goat's hair, to be a covering upon the tabernacle. 11 curtains shalt thou make. The length of one curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits. And the 11 curtains shall be all of one measure. And thou shalt couple 5 curtains by themselves, and 6 curtains by themselves, and shalt double the 6th curtain in the forefront of the tabernacle. And thou shalt make 50 loops on the edge of the one curtain that is outmost in the coupling, and 50 loops in the edge of the curtain which coupleth the second. And thou shalt make 50 taches of brass, and put the taches into the loops, and couple the tent together, that it may be one. And the remnant that remaineth of the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that remaineth, shall hang over the backside of the tabernacle, and a cubit on the one side, and a cubit on the other side of that which remaineth in the length of the curtains of the tent. It shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle on this side and on that side, to cover it. And thou shalt make a covering for the tent of ram skins dyed red, and a covering above of badgers' skins. And thou shalt make boards for the
Boards are next.
Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine woven linen, and blue and purple and scarlet thread. With artistic designs of cherubim you shall weave them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits, and every one of the curtains shall have the same measurements. 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another. The other 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another. And you shall make loops of the yarn on the edge of the curtain on the outer edge of one set, and likewise you should do on the outer edge of the other curtain of the second set. 50 loops you shall make in the one curtain, and 50 loops you shall make on the edge of the curtain that is on the end of the second set, that the loops may be clasped to one another. And you shall make 50 clasps of gold, and couple the curtains together with the clasps, so that it may be one tabernacle. You shall also make curtains of goat hair to be a tent over the tabernacle. You shall make 11 curtains. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits, the width of each curtain 4 cubits, and the 11 curtains shall all have the same measurements. And you shall couple 5 curtains by themselves, and 6 curtains by themselves, and you shall double over the 6th curtain at the forefront of the tent. You shall make 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is outermost in one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain of the second set. And you shall make 50 bronze clasps. Put the clasps into the loops, and couple the tent together, that it may be one. The remnant that remains of the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that remains, shall hang over the back of the tabernacle. And a cubit on one side and a cubit on the other side of what remains of the length of the curtains of the tent shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle on this side and on that side to cover it. You shall also make a covering of ram skins dyed red for the tent, and a covering of badger skins above that.
Make the tabernacle from 10 sheets of fine linen. These sheets are to be decorated with blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, with figures of cherubim skillfully embroidered into them. Each sheet must be 42 feet long and 6 feet wide. All 10 sheets must be exactly the same size. Join 5 of these sheets together into one set. Then join the other 5 sheets into a second set. Put loops of blue yarn along the edge of the last sheet in each set. The 50 loops along the edge of one set are to match the 50 loops along the edge of the other. Then make 50 gold clasps to fasten the loops of the 2 sets of sheets together, making the tabernacle a single unit. Make heavy sheets of cloth from goat hair to cover the tabernacle. There must be 11 of these sheets, each 45 feet long and 6 feet wide. All 11 of these sheets must be exactly the same size. Join 5 of these together into one set and join the other 6 into a second set. The 6th sheet of the second set is to be doubled over at the entrance of the sacred tent. Put 50 loops along the edge of the last sheet in each set and fasten them together with 50 bronze clasps. In this way, the 2 sets will become a single unit. An extra half sheet of this roof covering will be left to hang over the back of the tabernacle, and the covering will hang down an extra 18 inches on each side. On top of these coverings, place a layer of tanned ram skins, and over them put a layer of fine goat skin leather. This will complete the roof covering.
So the question is, do you put more faith in the guy that sounds like God speaking at the end with the low bass? Or does the English accent give you more confidence? For me, the English accent, that gets it every time. But you notice the different colors? Now, it's interesting, the last 2 curtains we looked at did not give dimensions, did it? It didn't say how big. So one guy made them extra big and had, hooks on each end of it to put it onto the ground, or pegs to put it to the ground. So they evidently knew, but it didn't go into detail here. And you're all saying, now, how does this cause me to grow spiritually, Bryan? I have no idea. Let's go to the boards. You say, I'm already bored. I know. That's why we're going to the boards, because you're already bored. Here we go. Verse 15 to 25, reading out of the New Living Translation, again, right in front of you. For the framework of the tabernacle, construct the frames of the acacia wood. We saw that before. Each frame must be 15 feet high and 27 inches wide, and 2 pegs under each frame. Make all the frames identical. Make 20 of these frames to support the curtain on the south side of the tabernacle. Also 40 silver bases, 2 bases each under each frame, and the pegs, or the tenons, it says in the King James and New King James, tenons, the pegs fitting securely on the base. For the north side of the tabernacle, make another 20 frames, and there are 40 silver bases, 2 bases under each frame. Make 6 frames for the rear and the west side of the tabernacle along the 2 additional frames to reinforce the rear corners of the tabernacle. These corner frames will be matched at the bottom firmly and attached at the top with a single ring, forming a single corner unit. Make sure both of the corner units the same way, so there will be 8 frames on the rear of the tabernacle set in 6 silver bases, 2 bases under each frame. So 15 feet high, now we know the height of it, so it's 15 feet wide, right? 45 feet long, this rectangle, and now 15 feet high. And each of these boards are 2 feet 3 inches in width. 20 of them on the north side, 20 of them on the south side, and then on the back. So the opening of the tabernacle would always be set to the east. And the west was always the back of the tabernacle. That's the way it was set up. And the backside had 6 boards, but then it had 2 additional boards on the corners or on the back. So it made the rectangle secure, because it seems like the east side, where the entrance was, did not have the support that you would think. We're going to see more here in just a minute. But now in verse 26 to 30, as we finish up here tonight, again, reading out of the New Living Translation, make crossbars of acacia wood to link the frames, 5 crossbars for the north side of the tabernacle, 5 for the south side. Make 5 crossbars for the rear of the tabernacle, which will face west. The middle crossbars attach halfway up the frames, run all the way from one end of the tabernacle to the other. Overlay the frames with gold, and make gold rings to hold the crossbars. Overlay the crossbars with gold as well. Set up this tabernacle according to the pattern which I've shown you on the mountain. He says it once again. So again, I did forget on the last one when they build them that they're setting on these tenons or these base pieces of silver. That's where the board is setting. It's not setting on the ground. They have this base piece, 2 of them for each board. And the board sets in each side of the silver tenons, foundation piece there, if you would. So I have 3 more videos to show you here on this that'll hopefully give us the full picture. The final one is all of it together. Okay.
Tabernacle of shittim wood, standing up. 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and 1.5 cubits shall be the breadth of one board. 2 tenons shall there be in one board, set in order one against another. Thus shalt thou make for all the boards of the tabernacle. And thou shalt make the boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards on the south side southward. And thou shalt make 40 sockets of silver under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under one board for his 2 tenons, and 2 sockets under another board for his 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle on the north side there shall be 20 boards, and there 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under one board, and 2 sockets under another board. And for the sides of the tabernacle westward thou shalt make 6 boards, and 2 boards shalt thou make for the corners of the tabernacle in the 2 sides. And they shall be coupled together beneath, and they shall be coupled together above the head of it unto one ring. Thus shall it be for them both. They shall be for the 2 corners. And they shall be 8 boards, and their sockets of silver 16 sockets, 2 sockets under one board, and 2 sockets under another board. And thou shalt make bars of shittim wood, 5 for the boards on the one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the side of the tabernacle for the 2 sides westward. And the middle bar in the midst of the boards shall reach from end to end. And thou shalt overlay the boards with gold, and make their rings of gold for places for the bars, and thou shalt overlay the bars with gold. And thou shalt rear up the tabernacle according to the fashion thereof which was showed thee in the mount. And thou shalt make a veil of blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen of cunning work, with cherubims shall it be made. And thou shalt hang it upon the 4 pillars of shittim wood, overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold, upon the 4 sockets of silver.
And for the tabernacle you shall make the boards of acacia wood standing upright. 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and 1.5 cubits shall be the width of each board. 2 tenons shall be in each board for the binding one to another. Thus you shall make for all the boards of the tabernacle. And you shall make the boards for the tabernacle 20 boards for the south side. You shall make 40 sockets of silver under 20 boards, 2 sockets under each of the boards for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle, the north side, there shall be 20 boards. And there are 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under each of the boards. For the far side of the tabernacle, westward, you shall make 6 boards. And you shall also make 2 boards for the 2 back corners of the tabernacle. They shall be coupled together at the bottom, and they shall be coupled together at the top by 1 ring. Thus it shall be for both of them. They shall be for the 2 corners. So there shall be 8 boards with their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 sockets under each of the boards. And you shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the boards on one side of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the boards on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the side of the tabernacle for the far side westward. The middle bar shall pass through the midst of the boards from end to end. You shall overlay the boards with gold, make their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and overlay the bars with gold. And you shall raise up the tabernacle according to its pattern, which you were shown on the mountain. You shall make a veil woven of blue, purple,
of bronze, but you shall make upright frames for the tabernacle of acacia wood. 10 cubits shall be the length of a frame, and 1.5 cubits the breadth of each frame. There shall be 2 tenons in each frame for fitting together. So shall you do for all the frames of the tabernacle. You shall make the frames of the tabernacle 20 frames for the south side, and 40 bases of silver you shall make under the 20 frames, 2 bases under one frame for its 2 tenons, and 2 bases under the next frame for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle, on the north side, 20 frames, and there 40 bases of silver, 2 bases under one frame, and 2 bases under the next frame. And for the rear of the tabernacle westward, you shall make 6 frames, and you shall make 2 frames for corners of the tabernacle in the rear. They shall be separate beneath, but joined at the top, at the first ring. Thus shall it be with both of them. They shall form the 2 corners. And there shall be 8 frames with their bases of silver, 16 bases, 2 bases under one frame, and 2 bases under another frame. And you shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the frames of the one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the frames of the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the frames of the side of the tabernacle at the rear westward. The middle bar, halfway up the frames, shall run from end to end. You shall overlay the frames with gold, and shall make their rings of gold for holders for the bars, and you shall overlay the bars with gold. Then you shall erect the tabernacle according to the plan for it that you were shown on the mountain. And you shall make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet yarns and fine twined linen. It shall be made with cherubim skillfully worked into it. And you shall hang it on the 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, with hooks of gold on 4 bases of silver. And you shall hang the veil from the clasps, and bring the ark of the testimony in there within the veil. And the veil shall separate for you the holy place from the most holy. You shall put the mercy seat on the ark of the testimony in the most holy place. And you shall set the table outside the veil, and the lampstand on the south side of the tabernacle opposite.
Today when you go to Israel, there's plentiful, but they're almost like bushes. They're not very big. So there's 2 different things. One is that they made it sort of like this, not solid like you saw in the other 2, but it's just sort of a frame. And then others said, no, probably at the time, the acacia or the shittim trees were big, were huge trees. Because Israel was deforested. You know, back when David was a boy, there were huge woods, you know. There was lions and bears that lived there. But if you study the history of Israel, they were destroyed so many times that each time a country took over that area, they would cut down all the trees so the next group couldn't make instruments of war against them. And then also, there's been times where the way you were taxed was by how many trees you had on your land. So you want your taxes to go down, you cut your trees off your land, your taxes go down. But one reason or another, now there's a lot of dirt where there used to be beautiful forest. And of course, there's no lion or bears there anymore either. So it's very possible that the trees at this time in those areas were far, far bigger. And of course, they're not in the promised land yet. Anyway, they're just right on the outside of heading out of Egypt, as we know. So this is tough stuff, but yet we did it. And I'll tell you what, it's getting through there. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to get to heaven, and God says, well, we have plan A, B, C, D. You need to answer, how many boards are on the north side of the tabernacle? And you're going to say what? 20. And they'll say, okay, you're not in C anymore, or not in the D class, you're C class now. If you want to get to the A class, you know, how many silver tenons were under each of those boards? Each board had how many? 2. Now how many on the north side? How many tenons? 40. It said that. It's right there in the Bible. We read that, Ann. I can't believe you. I'm just really disappointed now. But anyway, it is. How many hooks? 50, yes. And the first curtain was what kind of material? Was gold. Was gold. Yeah, so you think about this. I mean, they're estimating the silver alone would have been like 70 tons of weight. And then, of course, those boards covered in gold. And we're talking some hefty stuff here. When the pillar of cloud moved, the Levites went, oh, no. You know. And then when it stayed, they're like, oh, good. But it's funny because now when we read through there's sometimes they stop very shortly and they got to put all that back together and go again. So it is interesting when you realize the intricacy of this, the weight of this, but also the children of Israel, when they're taking it down, they're probably all like, hey, they're taking the fabric off. We're going to get to see the sides of the tabernacle. We're going to get to see the golden tabernacle. And boy, that final fourth curtain comes down and they're looking at the gold sides. It would have been pretty exciting, I think, for the various things for them to see.